And here's an overview of the scoping meeting agenda. We'll start with introductions and identification of the purpose of the meeting tonight. There'll be a description of the proposed project. We will go through the Lafco process and then have an overview of the California Environmental Quality Act process, where we are in that process. And then we'll open it up for public comments at that point, and then close the meeting. So with that, I'll go to the next slide and introduce Michael with City of Sacramento to take it from here.
Hi, my name is Michael Hannibal. I'm Associate Planner with the City of Sacramento, and I'll be going over the project itself and providing, kind of a scope of what is proposed by the applicant team and a general overview of the EIR and CEQA process for the project. But for now, we'll have folks introduce themselves generally in order here, as you see on the screen.
Hi, good evening. I'm Cheryl Hodge, Principal Planner with the City of Sacramento. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Scott Johnson. I'm a Senior Planner on the environmental team. We'll be managing the preparation of the environmental impact report. Jose?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jose Enriquez. I'm the Executive Officer for the Sacramento Local Agency Formation Commission. Welcome.
And folks with the applicant team.
Hi, this is Nick Aptis with the Thomas Law Group.
Hi, and this is Jeff Griffin with North Point Development.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. And of course, Rod already has introduced himself. Thanks again, everybody. And so again, the purpose of this meeting is to obtain agency and public input and comment on the scope of the issues and analysis that the city and LAFCO will consider as part of the environmental impact report. And we'll take those, we would prefer those to be in writing. If we have any clarifying questions, we can go over those at the end. Next slide. So in general, we just wanted to give an overview of the city here, mapped out, and you can see generally the project location, the red box in the upper left-hand corner. This map shows the city and the city's boundary in white. The empty white area up there in the upper left-hand corner is the airport. The dark gray shaded areas are study areas set aside in the city's general plan, and generally provide policy direction for certain study areas and how the city might address policies or land uses in the future. You can see that red box is within the Natomas Joint Vision Study area. Next slide. And so zooming into the project area, it is noted there in red. And so it is just south of I-5 and to the southeast of the Sacramento International Airport. The shadings there in orange show the airport as well as adjacent lands proposed for future development by the county. And to the north of the project site is shaded in blue there, the Metro Air Park development, which is currently under development with many large industrial properties as well. And to the east there, outlined in yellow, is the city, and you can see them numerous subdivisions of North of Thomas. Next slide. So a description of the project. The applicant team has proposed construction of up to 6.6 million square feet of industrial development, and that's across the 408 acres as shown in the previous slide. Also, approximately 100,000 square feet of retail commercial uses and 61,000 square feet of hotel or hospitality. All these developments would also include, of course, parking lots and bioretention areas for drainage and to help with certain engineering and drainage issues out there in the Thomas area. The proposed project does necessitate entitlements with the city, and those include a pre-zone, a general plan amendment, a tentative master parcel map, development agreement, and plan unit development, all to help fold a project of this type and scale into the city's North Thomas community plan and relevant land use policies. This effort, Sacramento Lafco will also be taking up a sphere of influence amendment in municipal services review. And this would include then annexation of the project and any related detachments. Next slide. So the environmental effects and scope of the EIR, this is really why we're here tonight. The city and LAFCO anticipate these following aspects that the EIR will analyze. You can see in this bulleted list, this is a fairly standard set of impact areas, including aesthetics, ag resources, air quality, bioresources, cultural, geology, hydrology, of course, was referenced earlier, land use, noise, public services, transportation, and tribal cultural resources. So the EIR will identify and evaluate alternatives to the project as well. And CEQA requires that an EIR evaluate a no project alternative as well as a reasonable range. So again, with these set of impact areas that will be analyzed, different alternatives will be presented through that draft EIR and all the analysis to those alternatives. Next slide. So comments and suggestions regarding the scope of the analysis of the EIR are invited from all interested parties, of course. All comments will be received by the city and LAFCO. Written comments or questions concerning the EIR for the proposed project are due at 5 p.m. on April 4th, 2022. And we please ask that any contact information be included in that. And for the city, you could please address those to Scott Johnson, senior planner, as mentioned before. You can see his information here on the slide. It's also posted on the city's website. Next slide. That web page for submitting comments and finding more information is has linked here. And you can also find this information on Sacramento LAFCO's page. They have a separate and dedicated page for this project as well. Thank you, and I believe we'll hand it over to Jose now.
Thank you, Michael. Once again, welcome to the scoping meeting. My name is Jose Enriquez. I'm the executive officer for the Sacramento Local Agency Formation Commission. My presentation will vary a little bit from what you're used to if you've attended many NOP scoping meetings, and that will cover the LAFCO process, both for the sphere of influence and for the annexation. This is because most people really are not familiar with LAFCO and its processes. I'm hoping that this will shed some light in terms of what my agency does, as well as help you with any questions or formulate any questions you may have. Perhaps they're more relevant for the city process, perhaps they're more relevant for the LAFCO process. But the goal here is to shed some more light into what Sacramento LAFCO does and the various stages that it has to encounter on this proposed project. Next slide, please. So what is LAFCO? Basically, LAFCO is an independent state regulatory body composed of locally elected officials. I will go over the officials who sit on the commission. I want to really emphasize I am not LAFCO. I am the lead advisor and the head administrator for LAFCO. My commission is LAFCO, and they're the ones who make final decisions. LAFCO, in a nutshell, basically regulates the service area or the boundaries of most local agencies, with very notable exceptions. We have nothing to do with the actual shape of the counties. We have no jurisdiction over state or federal agencies or for school districts. The cities in special districts, both independent and dependent, LAFCO has jurisdiction over those. But please note that there is a very narrow definition as to what constitutes a district that LAFCO has jurisdiction. So for example, the air quality control district, it's a district, but not one that falls under LAFCO's jurisdiction. Next slide, please. So LAFCO is charged with implementing state policies while taking into account local conditions. All 58 counties have a LAFCO, and we all have to implement the same charge from the state. But obviously, there's a LAFCO in every county because what happens in Sacramento is very different from what happens in LA. And the legislature formed us in such a way that we would take a look into what is specific to the local conditions in our county and be able to make a ruling on that. So a decision that a commission may make in Yolo may not be the same decision that happens in Sacramento or in El Dorado or up in Placer. We have 4 overall missions: promote early growth, discourage urban sprawl, preserve agriculture and open space, and encourage efficient, sustainable public services. Obviously, these 4 mandates are broad. They do not have a priority or a ranking in state law. So therefore, the commission has to basically weigh the facts, try to apply it to its mission, and come up with the best decision that it can. As you can see, these can be in conflict with each other. The discouragement of urban sprawl and the preservation of agriculture may work, but in some cases, the efficient provision of services, if the facts are correct, will override both of those. So again, they sometimes can be in conflict with each other. So please keep that in mind. Next slide, please. So while LAFCO's powers are broad, our jurisdiction is very limited. We're actually limited only to regulating the boundaries of local governments. We have no oversight on the internal operations of a district or a city. And the legislature basically indicates that there are that LAFCO cannot do certain things. One of the things that I get phone calls on a lot is somebody complaining about the operations of a local agency. We have no oversight over that. We don't oversee what a city does or a special district does. And one of the very specific prohibitions that's in the state law for LAFCOs is that we cannot regulate land use. That's the jurisdiction of the county. That's the jurisdiction of the cities. So LAFCO can't say, we'll annex this to the city, but instead of building 400 homes, you're going to limit it to 100. We cannot do that. That's regulation of land use. That's again one of the misconceptions that's out there on LAFCO. We have a lot of laws to balance when the commission makes a decision, not just LAFCO law, but there's also CEQA, which is the reason why we're here, the Revenue and Taxation Code, the Political Reform Act, and other statutes. And LAFCO decisions are quasi-legislative, meaning that they cannot be appealed to anyone else except for the courts. So some people think that they don't like the LAFCO decision, they're going to appeal to the Board of Supervisors. That's not. They have no say in being able to overrule LAFCO. It would have to be the courts. Next slide, please. So who's our commission? Basically 2 members from the Board of Supervisors, 2 members from the city councils of the cities, and specifically the Sacramento County. One of the city council members who sits on LAFCO has to come from the city of Sacramento. The other 6 cities in the county rotate that second city seat. We also have 2 members from the Board of Directors of Independent Special Districts. We have 1 member who represents the public at large. And each of these 4 categories has an alternate. Next slide, please. So the Cartesian Oxfordsburg, also known as LAFCO law or CKH, calls for each commissioner to exercise independent judgment on behalf of the public. And they are there to basically make the best decision that they can given their charge, and not just on the interests of their appointing agencies alone. And in fact, we have numerous examples from around the state where a commissioner who sits, let's say, on the Board of Supervisors votes one way, and when they sit on LAFCO, they vote the other way. So That's what's called basically the independent hat or the Lafco hat in Lafco circles. So they're supposed to be independent of the interests of their appointing agency. And commissioners make the final decisions. So I, as an advisor, will give them the best recommendation that I can. My staff and I strive to give our commissioners the most amount of information that we can give them so they can come to an informed decision. But obviously, ultimately, they're the ones who make the final call. Next slide, please. So this, in a nutshell, is that there's a lot of things that LAFCOs have to weigh. And, sometimes staff recommends one way and the commission goes the other way. And that's them exercising their independent judgment. That's them taking into account their responsibilities and all these other matters that they have to weigh. Next slide. So we're going to get to the meat of why you're here. So there's a sphere of influence and an annexation. I'm going to go both through these individually. There are two separate but related LAFCO discretionary decisions. The provisions within Cortese-Hertzberg LAFCO laws to create, add, or amend SOIs they're separate from the provisions in LAFCO law relating to the annexations. And so each of these decisions are deliberative, they're discretionary, and they're independent of each other, and the commission has to make them separately. By local policy, the commission cannot amend an SOI and annex territory all on the same hearing. That's by local policy. It's in my previous county that I worked for, they could amend an SOI and annex all in the same hearing, and sometimes all in the same item on the agenda. So I want to be very clear. Just because a local jurisdiction puts land within their agency's general plan designation or their study area, does not mean the LAFCO is going to put that land in the sphere of influence. And just because a land is on the sphere of influence for an agency doesn't mean that it's a done deal and the annexation is a foregone conclusion. Like I said, there are two separate and distinct decisions that the commission has to make. Next slide. So sphere of influence, what is it? It's the probable growth of an agency over time. LAFCO takes information relating to how well the agency is currently providing services and all agencies currently providing services to a parcel. And they try to determine how far and how fast it should grow over time. So it's akin to a work plan, or it's akin to a general plan when they look at their scoping area, but they're separate from that. It's just that's a planning tool that the legislature has given to LAFCOs. The overall goal is to encourage viable public agencies, and that strikes a balance between accommodating growth, both fiscally and economically and population-wise, while preserving valuable resources and community character. Next slide, please. As part of the process, LAFCO has to provide 21 days notice in a local paper as well as on our website when it's going to amend an SOI. And so that means that it's a long-term planning. It's not something that's done by the flight of night. And in addition, notice that this is much more of a notice that we have to provide beyond what the Brown Act calls for, which is 72 hours. In some cases, though not always, an amendment or an addition to a sphere of influence is accompanied by something that's called a municipal services review. That really depends upon the circumstances of the proposal. Next slide, please. So now we're going to cover annexations. And annexation is defined as the inclusion, attachment, or addition of territory to a city or district. The annexation must be consistent with an agency's SOI. That's what was meant earlier by their separate but related actions. So annexations are considered under LAFCO law as a change of organization, and it can be grouped with other actions the LAFCO has to take. So a lot of times we call a proposal a reorganization because it's an annexation plus related other items that may be happening, such as detaching from, let's say, the service area of another district, or let's say a county service area. So by way of an example, you could have a city that provides fire service, and you have a portion of unincorporated land that is currently being provided, service is being provided by a fire protection district. When that parcel is annexed into the city, it must be detached from the special district. So that way fire service is provided by the city fire department and no longer being provided by the independent special district. So the other thing that you have to also keep in mind is that SOIs can be initiated by Lafco or by a private entity. But all annexations must be initiated by petition from either the public, by landowners or registered voters, or by a public agency. Next slide, please. So the commission must act in accordance with state law and locally adopted policies. They have to comply with CEQA as either a lead agency or responsible agency. As it relates to this project, LAFCO is co-lead with the city of Sacramento. They must adopt determinations to support a decision, and they can set the terms and conditions of its approval. So, and an annexation is not final until LAFCO files a certificate of completion with the county clerk recorder. And I typically do that once all of the conditions of approval have been met by the applicant. And I believe that that is my last slide. So I will pass it over to Michael and Nick.
Actually, Jose, I'll take it from here. Just going over the CEQA process. Just a brief overview. This slide is intended to give a kind of a visual representation of the overall CEQA process, starting with an application submittal and the determination that the project is subject to CEQA. And at that time, then the lead agency would prepare the notice of preparation, which was released for this project. And it identifies to state agencies and the public in general that an EIR is being prepared for the project and identifies the project itself, and also what subjects are anticipated to be covered in the EIR. During that 30-day public review time of the NOP, a scoping meeting is held, which is where we are at tonight. So we're right in the middle of that 30-day public review period, and it closes on April 4th. Today, March 16th, we're having the scoping meeting. And as you can see, this is the first opportunity for the public to be involved in the CEQA process. And the intent of this meeting is really to receive comments on what the scope of the EIR should be. So what should we cover in the EIR? And then from this point, then we will draft the draft EIR, and we'll prepare that, and it will likely be released sometime late spring, early summer of this year. And the draft EIR gets released for a 45-day public review period. And at that point, the public will be afforded the opportunity to make comments on whether the EIR adequately addressed all of the potential environmental impacts. At the close of that 45-day public review period, we will prepare written responses to all of the comments received on the draft EIR and prepare a final EIR at that point, anticipated to be sometime in the fall, winter of this year. And then at that point, those responses get routed to those that have commented, and the approval hearings will start sometime early next year. So that's sort of where we're looking schedule-wise and the other opportunities for the public to be involved. But again, we're now early in the process and really kind of looking for comments focused on the scope of the EIR. So at this point, we will be opening it up to anyone who wants to provide comments on the scope of the EIR. Again, the purpose is to not necessarily get into a question and answer session or debate the merits of the project itself. It's really strictly to get insight on from the public on what subjects and topics should be covered in the EIR and any kind of specific ways that you may have specific insight on. And again, comment period closes on April 4th, 5 p.m. Written comments due to Scott Johnson is shown here in this slide. We really recommend that even if you do give verbal comments tonight, this meeting is being recorded. We'll generally take down comments received tonight, but we really encourage written comments to be submitted before the end of the comment period. And so with that ends the presentation portion. We will be opening up now to comments. Again, please use the raise hand feature, and we will allow those to comment who raise their hands, and we'll go from there. Thanks. I'm not seeing it. Oh, okay, here we go. We got one hand raised. Here we go. Okay, we've got a hand raised from Alex. I'm going to allow you to talk. There you go. Go ahead, Alex. It looks like you're unmuted, Alex, but we don't hear anything on our end. Still not hearing anything, Alex. There is an opportunity with the Q&A button at the bottom. If you wanted to write your comment in, could potentially do it that way. But again, we're not really hearing anything coming from you. I see that you're unmuted though. Sorry, Alex, something's not seeming to work here. Oh, I see your comment. Hand raised by accident. Got it. All right. I see another hand raised from Lon. I will move you forward. There you go.
Ready for my question. This is Lon.
Yep, we can hear you. Go for it.
Okay, I was just wondering, with all the expansion that's going on in Natomas, the degree of coordination between the developers of this project and developers of other project, particularly with regard to traffic control. It's gotten pretty out of hand here in the area.
And this is Michael Hannibal, Associate Planner. Lon, are you referring to kind of construction, traffic control, those sorts of issues?
All those kind of issues, as the when they took away the building prohibition, as you know,
Sure.
for the levy, we've had a lot of expansion in this area, and traffic, particularly in the morning for school and everything, has kind of already gotten out of hand. So I know there's going to be some, you listed one of the things that are going to be considered in the study is traffic and that kind of thing. And I was wondering to what degree there's any coordination with other local developers in the area outside of this airport project, because everything's obviously related and intertwined.
Yeah, so generally, transportation and traffic are definitely an item reviewed and analyzed through the CEQA process and the EIR. And that goes for not just construction related traffic impacts, but also operational traffic impacts. So, what would these developments add to the overall system? And so those impacts will be analyzed on within this EIR, but also by our public works department and the consultants hired here to help kind of flesh those details out. I see Scott has maybe some more insight on that as well.
Yeah, Michael, thank you. Just to add to that, as part of the analysis within the EIR, we have to look at the cumulative effects of the development. So that in conjunction with other development, as you had mentioned. And I should point out too, though, one thing, the primary metric for evaluating transportation in CEQA now is vehicle miles traveled. So sometimes that doesn't always correlate with, the congestion maybe that is developed. Since the state changed the metric for evaluating transportation from LOS to VMT, it's kind of thrown a little curve into that analysis. So.
Okay, thank you.
While we're waiting to see if anyone else has any other comments, I did share my screen again to identify the links where the project documents are available. We'll give a few more minutes. I know that sometimes the Zoom is slightly behind when people raise their hands, so I want to make sure we don't miss anyone. But if there are no more hands after a few minutes, we can close the meeting. All right, well, I'm not seeing any other hands being raised. So with that, thank you everyone for attending and for your participation. Again, the meeting is being recorded and will be available. I think maybe Scott, you've got some closing remarks. Go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to, thanks, Rod. I just wanted to follow up just to see if anybody has any, I know we talked about the scope and content of the analysis in the EIR, but if anybody has any questions about the process or anything else, if we can answer anything like that, we'd be more than happy to, if you have any questions on process or anything.
Okay, great. And Scott, this recording of this meeting will be posted to the city's website at that same link there, or will it be in a different place?
We can certainly try to do that. That's something I'll have to check into. I've not I think we can. I just don't know about having posted an audio to the EIR webpage.
Okay,
We'll-
didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
Nah, no problem. And on my email address too, I just wanted to point out that the email is SR Johnson and not S Johnson. So it's SR Johnson at cityofsacramento.org. If it goes to the other, I most likely will get it, but it's usually delayed as the other person in the city with that email address forwards them to me when he gets them. So,
Yeah,
Lon, you got
no.
an-
Yeah, it looks like Lon's got another comment, but
Sure.
I'll allow you to talk there, Lon, in a second. Just wanted to point out that LAFCO and City of Sacramento as co-lead agencies, we'll be taking on that responsibility together, but Scott Johnson is the point for receiving comments. So please submit all written comments to Scott as identified throughout tonight.
I might have missed it, and I apologize if I did. Spring 2023 is when the final EIR is expected. Is there any, if assuming that it's favorable to go ahead, what are we talking about in terms of when the project would actually start?
Yeah, I can help answer that. So that's simply one of the many steps before physical development will occur. Having that final EIR time frame is simply having the document ready. It still has to go through the many hearings and public hearing process as a project to be approved by the city, and then through LAFCO as well for the sphere of influence amendment and annexation process. And then the projects or the project area would have individual buildings, individual projects be reviewed by the city at a later date, pending, anticipated approval and annexation by LAFCO. So those would have, each individual building project would have their own review and through planning and design. And then it would have a separate building permit review to finally obtain its building permit. So
2040 we're talking about.
I wouldn't go out that far, but it would be, a few years out, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. Once again, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your evening. Good night, everybody.
Yep, we appreciate your attendance.